Merhabalar Harici.com.tr izleyicileri, ben Esra Karahindiba. Amerika Birleşik Devletleri'nde uzun zamandır beklenen seçimler geride kaldı. Kamala Harris mi Donald Trump mı derken Trump zaferini güçlü bir şekilde ilan etti. Ocak'ta da görevini devralmaya hazırlanıyor. Peki Trump bundan sonra ne yapacak? İkinci dönemi birinci dönemiyle çok benzer dış politika unsurları mı içerecek, yoksa yeni bir yol haritası mı çizilecek? Bunları konuşacağız. Özellikle güvenlik ekseninde Türkiye ile ilişkiler bağlamında Trump'ın dünya liderleriyle ilişkisi nasıl olacak? Cumhurbaşkanı Erdoğan'la çok gitgelli bir dönemi olmuştu. Ancak son dönemlerinde Trump'ın Erdoğan'ı özellikle Suriye'den çekilme kararı sonrasında desteklediğini biliyoruz. Tabii ki şu anda da farklı gündemler var. F-35 konusu, Türkiye F-35 programına yeniden dahil olabilecek mi? En önemli başlıklar arasında elbette güvenlik var. Türkiye'nin sınırlarındaki PYD konusu, Amerika'nın devam eden bir desteği vardı. Tüm bunları Trump'ı hem kişisel olarak dediğim gibi çok yakından tanıyan hem de kabinesinde yer almış, Savunma Bakan Yardımcılığını yapmış tecrübeli bir isimle Guy Roberts'la konuşacağız. So, Mr. Guy Roberts, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Yeah, I know that you have been closely working with Donald Trump in his previous cabinet as you were Assistant Deputy Secretary of Defense, and you know how his policies were before, and you may foresee how it's going to continue from January. What is your primary expectation at this point?
Well, it's actually quite exciting because I think that President Trump has really made it clear that he intends to follow through on all of his campaign promises, focusing almost immediately on the immigration issue, the illegal immigration into the United States, and also the revamping of the tax structure to maximize tax reductions for middle class Americans. And on the international side, I fully expect him to really put pressure on allies and partners to do more for their defense and make the meet the commitments that they have made with regard to spending 2% or more on their GDP on defense. That'll be a key element. It was a key element in his first administration, and I actually was with him in at NATO headquarters where we talked at length about the need for our allies to step up to the plate, so to speak. And so I see those things as being very critical up front once he gets his team in place. But of course, the U.S. system is such that it'll take probably 6 months before that happens.
Yeah, let's talk about Ukraine. Trump promised to end Ukraine war, so he stated this like, "I can end the war in 24 hours." And still today, Trump's aides repeat the same claim, let's say, considering war taking a negative turn for Ukraine in the last few months. Will Trump be able to bring peace to Ukraine? Also, do you think Russian President Vladimir Putin, will accept a ceasefire or a peace deal?
But that's really the real challenge. I think it's unrealistic to expect that he can resolve this in 24 hours, which President Trump claimed that he can do. I think it's much more complicated than that. But I think he will engage directly with President Putin. I can see that happening, where he will pressure Putin to agree to a ceasefire and steps to resolve this issue. Of course, Ukraine is not going to be very enthusiastic about giving up territory, but I do think that given the current situation on the battlefield, the introduction of new weapon systems, this recent intermediate ballistic missile that the Russians fired on Ukraine, Ukraine's invasion of the Kursk region of Russia, can set the stage for a quid pro quo type negotiation where each side gives up something in return for, at least at the beginning, a ceasefire. Peace, I believe, is still going to take much longer than 24 hours as well.
Yeah, well, actually, President Biden, just before completing his term, also is also making some very considerable and very critical steps, like let's say, which can put Trump in difficult position because he signed a bill to let Ukraine to use U.S.-made missiles, long-range missiles against Russia. Secondly, a few days ago, it is only a very short time. Gazprom Bank, it is one of the major banks of Russia, very important for Russia for its international money transfers and energy trade, and several other banks. They got these sanctions. So what is Biden trying to do just before he leaves his post? Is he leaving some bombs in the hands of Trump?
I believe that that's certainly in the back of his mind that he is setting the stage for successful negotiations by Trump, whether he wants to give all the credit to Trump or not. Of course, they would probably his administration would probably deny that. But I do think that given the kinds of things, the long range fires that he's now authorized, additional increases in military hardware that he's agreed to, and his encouragement by other allies to do the same is helping and will help in arriving at a successful ceasefire negotiation.
Yeah, about Trump's new presidency, upcoming presidency, second term, European leaders actually were not really enthusiastic, and they're not happy. I mean, some of them are not happy that President-elect Trump is going to return to White House. What kind of reorganization do you anticipate from Europe to a Trump era, to a new Trump era?
From the alliance standpoint, the Secretary General Rudd has been very enthusiastic supporter and a campaigner, if you will, just like his predecessor, Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, to see that the allies do more. And I think overall they have been doing more. I mean, we've had, I believe, over 21 countries in the allies now that are meeting the 2% uh, military spending on GDP, and the others are on the road to doing so. And the newer allies like Finland and Sweden, I've seen very robust spending on defense and training, and even to the point of producing manuals for the population to undertake certain activities in the event there actually should be a war. That I think has deterrence value. I think the message being sent by the alliance is that we are an alliance, and that if you cross that line and attack any of us, you've got to face all of us. Likewise, we've seen in the Indo-Pacific region reaching out to building a coalition with partners in the region, including, of course, Australia and New Zealand, but also Vietnam. We've just recently sold them some training jets and other countries as well. The Trump administration will probably be less focused on alliance building and more focused on one-on-one relationships that are self-supporting in terms of defense. And so that might be a shift in what we'll see happening between the Trump and the Biden administrations.
So you mean that from corporate diplomacy, Trump is going to prefer a personal diplomacy?
yes, I think whereas the Biden administration has been this coalition building, we have the Five Eyes group, for example. We have this reaching out to build a new interconnected relationship, very similar actually to what was attempted back in the late 50s and early 60s of something called SEATO, the Southeast Asia Treaty Organization, which was tried to mimic the NATO alliance. For a variety of reasons, it didn't work out, and it fell apart. But now, in light of the Chinese aggressive behavior and its claims over the South China Sea and other areas, its belligerency against Taiwan, uh, and its refusal to agree to or accept the, the opinions by the International Court of Justice on the law of sea claims, um, the hostile relationship they've had with the Philippines over outlying islands. All of that makes that particular region a potential hotspot, and the recognition that the only way that there's going to be an ability to stop and deter China from continuing on acting in that way is to build these relationships, and I think you'll see a lot of enthusiasm for doing so.
So talking about personal diplomacy and personal relationships, how would you describe a potential relationship between Trump and Xi Jinping, Trump and Macron, Trump and President Erdogan?
Well, that's I, that's a very you're looking at an area that is very important, and I'm not sure exactly how the Trump administration is going to probe it, except I believe that President Trump puts a lot of store in personal relationships with national leaders. And that's why I think he's more comfortable and will be more comfortable in building these one-on-one relationships as opposed to building large partnerships. So I would expect to see much more of this one-on-one Trump meeting with the various presidents and prime ministers throughout the region that he considers key in establishing strategic stability within the region, whether it be in Southeast Asia, the alliance partnership, Mediterranean, or what have you. And so I think you can expect to see him and much more proactive in building those personal relationships, than we saw in the Biden administration.
Yeah. Okay. Talking about Trump and Erdogan, talking about the US and Turkey, cooperation areas and challenges, some disputes. Let's talk about that a bit. Especially PYD issue is a big issue for Turkey that US is trying to beat one terror group by using another terror group, especially as Turkey is a NATO ally for the US, but still does not listen what Ankara thinks about PYD. That's number one issue for Turkey. And what do you think about F-35 issue? Turkey would would Turkey join back to F-35 program? What do you think about these main issues? And then please also tell me your comments on how would Turkey be a facilitator in the Middle East, especially bringing peace to Palestine and end this war by Israel.
Well, you just asked me a question that we'll need to take the rest of the day to answer. That's a let's we look at a relationship with Turkey and the leadership there. again, I believe that Turkey is a critical partner in ensuring peace and stability within the region, but at the same time, there's a lot of turmoil, if you will. Number one is this apparent uh, building a relationship with Russia and China over the short and long term um, that is inconsistent with the NATO alliance position on, of course, Russia's aggression against Ukraine and Iranian support for Russian aggression by selling them drones and missiles, of which we've seen on the battlefield already, uh, and uh, and the responses to that. The there's there are, of course, you know better than I, a lot of political turmoil within Turkey at the moment. And of course, I think one of the still unsolved areas is what to do with the 2 million um, people that are displaced as a result of various wars in there. And I think Trump would be very interested in meeting with Erdogan to discuss what to do about Syria and resolve that problem. And partly because I think President Trump will be looking for an exit strategy to where the U.S. forces can leave that particular area of the Middle East, and because during the campaign he even referenced it as one of the places that are what he would call forever wars, in which we are involved militarily in all various different parts all over the world. Um, as far as Hamas and Hezbollah and other terrorist groups, that's a real challenge. I was very hopeful that the Abraham Accords would be the approach that the whole region would take. Which again was a Trump initiative in his first administration, with countries Israel, UAE, Sudan, and I believe Morocco had basically signed a peace treaty in which they promised to work together to develop economically, scientifically, engineering, and to work to maintain and create an environment for peace and security in the region, free from terrorist activities and the hatred that we've seen over the past several decades, to the point where I saw a country like Saudi Arabia even considering joining this process. And now, of course, that's all on hold as a result of the Hamas attack on Israel and the response by Israel, which is in many people's minds far excessive to what has happened there.
Well, it's really interesting that, yeah, I interviewed you in Ankara before. As you would remember, it was an hour interview and we discussed about this topic. I don't want to repeat the same thing. Maybe our audience can go and watch that episode once more. But again, like all the Western discourse repeat the same thing as if the things started with a Hamas attack on October 7th and nobody's talking
Correct.
about what was happening from 1948. And I really don't, okay, I'm the moderator and I'm the presenter, but let me contribute to this discussion. I really don't understand why, if the US government is willing to make a peace in the region with Abraham Accords and bringing everyone together and promise for a a peace period. Just the US needs to understand that Palestine, according to UN resolutions, needs a freedom. And under this oppression from 1948, it is not given to them. This two-state solution is still pending. And how many people were injured or dead in October 7th? I don't know. But now, in according to international organizations reports, almost 100,000 people dead in Gaza, including the West Bank.
Mhm.
Is still witnessing a lot of settlements. And what does this settlements mean? That they're just taking people's lands and home, which is causing no peace situation. Why wouldn't the US push on Israel to make two-state solution for bringing peace to Middle East?
Well, I think that's a very good question and needs to be addressed. The challenge, and I wouldn't go back to 1948. I'd go back to 1917 and the Balfour Declaration, which created the environment that we are in today, in which basically there was a guarantee of a Jewish homeland. Um, and the problem there is that you've got Hamas, the Palestinian Authority, and others that have in their charters statements to the effect that we want to exterminate Israel. And when that is one of your primary goals, it's very difficult to sit down across the table and negotiate a peace agreement when one side wants to exterminate the other. It's if we get beyond that, if we got to a point where all the players in the region agreed in Israel's right to exist, I personally believe that all of those things that you mentioned are subject to negotiation. I think the Israelis would give up quite a bit to have a guarantee that there wouldn't be hundreds of rockets fired into their territory all the time. There wouldn't be these terrorist attacks all the time, and that there would be a recognition by those countries in the region that Israel is a legitimate state and has a right to exist. I think everything else would be subject to negotiation, and I think they'd give up a lot. But when you're at that particular point, and again, you have groups that are engaging in massive human rights violations, uh, and there may very well, and I certainly wouldn't put it past the fact that both sides have committed law of war or humanitarian violations. Um, it makes it you create a environment where people are consumed with hatred, and every as a result that attitude gets passed on to the next generation, and 10 years from now we'll have another intifada or a similar kind of a situation where people are at each other's throats. Sit here and say, we can come up with a solution is absolutely right. We can come up with a solution, but you have no willingness on the part of anybody to be able to sit down and say, okay, let's come up with a good deal. And it just doesn't seem to be happening. I wish it would. I think the Trump administration has, again, with President Trump's personal intervention, has a great opportunity to negotiate some of the things that you mentioned as enticement to bring everybody to the table, which again, we've had people go to the table. We've had in the past where we sat down and tried to hammer out agreements. We've done that in terms of weapons of mass destruction in the Middle East, for example, with the arms control Middle East negotiations. Came up with some great ideas. They're all out there. All it takes is political will to do it, and there's no political will to do it, unfortunately. So uh, we just have to keep trying and try to build consensus among the leaders of the region that it's in their best interest, it's in the people's best interest to sit down and craft a lasting peace. But whether that will happen or not, I have to say, after 40 years of looking at this issue, I think that the likelihood is we're going to be facing in 10 years another cycle of violence, and just the way it is in that region.
Yes, but we have the reality. International Criminal Court announced an arrest warrant for Netanyahu, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, because of his
Yeah.
war crimes. Yeah, this is the reality. We're talking about uh, just dozens of thousands of people. It is, we all the time say 50,000 people, but it is almost 100,000 people. And
Mhm.
that is really, I mean, that's just insane. So if you don't want war in the region, so the main thing, with whom you have war, with Iran, with Lebanon, with Hezbollah, with you don't like Muslim Brotherhood, etc. But all of these are related to just a free state of Palestine. So it's not happening. It's not going to happen. So I don't want to go deep in this discussion because it has no end. Yeah. So yeah. So in our last 5 minutes, I would like to go back to Trump's foreign policy about, let's say, he was really pro-Israel in his first term, and he carried the embassy to Jerusalem. And
Mhm.
but later on, he also had negative moments with Netanyahu. For the 2024 campaign, he has garnered greater Israeli support this time around. How will this affect his policies towards Iran and the Middle East in general?
Well, yes. I mean, the the primary player in my mind in the area right now is in fact Iran, because of it. It recognized as the number one supporter of international terrorism. I mean, they've been recognized that by the Gulf Cooperation Council, uh, as the fact that they support Hamas and Hezbollah, both also identified as international terrorist organizations. And so that, and then on couple that with the firing of rockets from Iran into Israel, which in turn creates an Israeli response, which in turn will create an Iranian, and will again have this spiral of violence that needs to be stopped and accepted, that there are routes towards a peaceful coexistence relationship. But as we know, the rhetoric in Iran is, death to Israel, death to the United States. That we have that kind of an attitude that doesn't isn't make it very conducive to having peace negotiations. Um, I wish I could give an answer that says this is the answer and embraced by everyone. But as you said, we could sit here and talk for hours about the problems and challenges in the Middle East. Lebanon, I'm watching what's going on in Lebanon, and I'm actually thinking back to 1982 when I was actually in Lebanon, and we had an attempt to maintain peace among the various groups, um, and and we had the Israelis invading Beirut, creating actually a siege situation there where they were cutting things off, uh, and it's like deja vu all over again, if you will. Uh, but how we can stop the cycle of violence is, it really is beyond me. I've been to, I've been dealing with this issue for a long time, and every time we came up with solutions, those solutions were quickly ignored, and the hatred then became prominent. So let's just keep trying, and hopefully someday we'll get to that point.
Yeah, okay. Okay, let's hope. And my last question, Mr. Roberts, is on relations with China. So Trump's cabinet has really some hawkish names which are against China. And Trump promised 60% tax on China. This is a big concern, actually. How do you think the U.S.-China relations will progress under the second term of President Trump?
Well, the China, it will be, I think, the primary international issue for the United States. China and their outlook on the world is one of a very long-term strategy. President Xi has made no bones about the fact that he wants China to be the world's hegemon by 2049. They made statements to that effect. I mean, they don't hide it. They and they have a very aggressive policy of uh, work, reaching out to multiple countries and to build these relationships through loans and various other economic incentives. They've again made claims of the South China Sea, which is very destabilizing. These claims are inconsistent with recognized law of the sea. Um, they have tried to and harassed many of the countries in the region for their territorial sea claims. That's resulted in countries like Vietnam coming very close to the United States and building a very strong relationship. One of my last trips as Assistant Secretary of Defense was to Hanoi and found the Vietnamese very enthusiastic about building a strong relationship with the United States, one that includes defense relationship. Um, Other countries in the region feel the same way with the more Chinese encroachment and Chinese bullying in various ways. They've also built a very strong internetwork relationship throughout the world. They've bought port facilities in the Panama Canal, for example, the Suez Canal area. They have a strong presence, the Straits of Malacca and other choke points around the world. They have created a very strong presence, which in a hostile environment could be a way to strangle the world economy. So we see these kinds of things happening and recognizing it within the United States, even that there are uh, activities on the part of China that have a negative impact on national security and the collective security relationship around the world. So I think we'll see a much more active, proactive confrontation of China and these issues. And there are some very big flashpoints or hot points, if you will, Taiwan being probably the number one at the moment, in which, again, the various statements by the leadership in China is that there will continue to be a strong push to fully integrate Taiwan within the Chinese political structure. So and I think that will be one of the big challenges in the first year of the Trump administration.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Guy Roberts. Thank you very much answering all my questions and for your good wishes too for the peace in the region. And let's see what's going to happen. Thank you very much for your precious time. Thanks for coming on to Harici.com.tr.
Well, thank you. It's a real pleasure.